seeing you and like being like, oh, it's the guy with the funny I Heart Junkie Honda sticker.
Yeah.
Like that's how I knew you. Like I didn't even know your name.
Okay, intro, take 2.
Yeah, let's go.
So, I'm going to start a new series here on the channel. I think I'm going to call it Pacific Northwest Driver Spotlight. This is going to be the first episode. I'm here with...
Alan, hello. Hatake MX-5.
Yep. I've known Alan for a short time, I would say, maybe 2 years. About.
You think it's been that long?
Yeah, dude.
Has it?
2 seasons of autocross, at least. Okay, first question. What is this thing that's sitting behind you?
It's a 1991 Mazda Miata.
When did you get it? What did it look like when you first bought it?
So I got this thing 3 years ago. It was bone stock. It was still had the daisies. It had OEM plus struts and springs. It had like an old man roll bar, but aside from that, like bone stock as a Miata can get.
Did you choose the Miata, or was it kind of something that just kind of worked out?
It was definitely something that just kind of worked out, this one specifically. I was definitely interested in getting a Miata at the time, and it just so happened that an opportunity came up and I got this one.
Why did or would you choose a Miata specifically over any other type of vehicle?
You know, it's just a cute little fun car that you could take bone stock and have some fun with it, but then still really push it to like an extreme limit. And the aftermarket's great. There's shit ton of parts for anything you want to do with one. You can drift them, you can off-road them, you can do, you know, road course stuff. So I think it's a great car for maybe someone who's not sure what they want to do. And I think kind of no matter what you wanted to pick, Miata's always the answer.
I guess Miatas definitely fall into a good category of vehicle as just a platform versus something that's good out of the box, like an E92 M3. Those things fuck, but like a Miata can fuck, and it can fuck in any way you want it to.
You can take an experienced driver and put them in a stock Miata, and they'll still have fun. Like, sure, it's slow, and sure, you know, it's not like the greatest thing in the world, but I definitely don't think it's a bad time. And you can take an experienced driver in someone like my car, and they'll still have a great time. And I think that's not the case for a lot of other cars. You know, it might not be the best, but it's definitely pretty damn good.
I know this is going to be a tough one for you. What would you choose if you were doing exactly what you're doing now in motorsports and in daily life, if you could not own a Miata any generation, not just an NA6?
If I could not own a Miata, I'd probably own an Integra. I don't know. I've always liked the way Integras look. See, I don't even know like the year of them. It's the 4-eyed.
The DC2.
DC2.
94 to 2001.
So, I don't know. For whatever reason, I always liked those. I always thought they were cool. And, you know, I'm not a front-wheel drive guy by any means.
I don't know, man. The trophy definitely speaks otherwise.
Yeah, you know, like, and that was like part of the whole reason why I wanted to drive your car. I guess we should explain. I drove Aaron's car, his Honda Civic, and got third place at AutoX. It's my first time competitively driving a front-wheel drive car. The only other time I've had experience in a front-wheel drive car is just driving my daily around.
Yeah, I have a video up of this whole thing. It doesn't go super into detail, but I definitely think that you proved yourself as a driver being able to completely switch platforms and still succeed.
Yeah, and honestly, like, I was super stoked about that, and honestly, I just wanted the experience of doing it, because, yeah, in the back of my mind, it is something that I'd still like to get to one day, is having an Integra, or maybe a Civic, something front-wheel drive, and that kind of, like, cemented the idea of front wheel drive still being fun and still being a good time. You know, I know front wheel drive, I think more or less from like ignorant people gets shit on a lot, but I definitely do think it can not only hold its own, but it brings its own set of challenges to the table. And I think I just wanted to experience those challenges and see what it was like.
Speaking of motorsports, what's your motorsports background? How long have you been driving your Miata competitively for, and what was your first event?
Let's see. So I've had the Miata for about 3 years. Pretty much right after I took ownership of it is when I started going to autocross. My first autocross event is June 2nd, 2019. It was on my mom's birthday. I remember that. I was super stoked to tell my mom on her birthday that I had finally, you know, done a car event. And to a lot of us, I think, you know, your first event is definitely something super special. And just getting onto, you know, the track or the parking lot or something is definitely a big step. As far as events since then, I've probably done around 30 autocross events. So I've been doing autocross on and off for the last 3 years. And then this last year is my first year doing road course. So I've been doing track days with On Grid, and I've done 5 track days. I've gone to Ridge Motorsports Park, Portland International Raceway, and Oregon Raceway Park.
Did you know that you were going to be doing track days and autocross with the car when you first bought it, or did you have other plans?
So I definitely kind of had a pretty good feeling that I did want to do some form of motorsports with it. I definitely didn't think I was going to be taking it to track days. You know, I think a lot of people who are into cars but don't do track days think of them as like a super serious, super inaccessible feat, when in reality, you know, it's just half the battle is showing up.
I know you kind of answered this in one of the previous questions, but let's do a recap of this last summer. This would be summer 2022 track day season. You said you attended 5 track days. Can you give me a rundown of each one of those in order?
Yeah, so let's see. My first track day was, I think it was March 3rd, March like 3rd, 4th, or 5th, something like that.
It was the 7th. I don't know why I remember that. March 7th.
March
and then it was
7th.
April 14th or something like that.
Yeah, some shit like that. And that was a beautiful sunny day at Ridge Motorsports Park. And honestly, the guy who pushed me into doing track days, his name's Barry. Shout out Barbell Motors. You know, he had done a few track days before that, and he was really pushing Chris and I to go do our first track days. And, you know, at that point, I had done maybe 20 plus autocross events, and the big holdover for me the summer prior was getting like coilovers all done. So, you know, I had coilovers all done, and for me, that was like the one thing I wanted to do before I did track days, and it was time to like nut up or shut up. So I nutted up, did my first track day, totally fucked some shit up by going off course, you know, as you do. But it was a good time. I had a good learning experience. My second track day, yeah, like Aaron mentioned, was in around like April time, again at Ridge Motorsports Park. And that was kind of a shit show, to be honest. It was like super rainy. The whole front straight got flooded out by the end of the 3rd session. Let me tell you, second track day, being your first rain track day, definitely intimidating for sure. But I definitely learned a lot, and it was still a good time. Portland International Raceway, I don't think you were there.
No, I wasn't there. I did a Portland day, but it was separate. It was
Yeah.
an SCCA thing.
And so that was a good time. At that point, that was my first day with full aero. So up until that point, I had just had either a splitter on my first event which I then fucked up and had to fix. It's a big story. I didn't have any aero on my second event, so my third event and first event at PIR was my first day with full aero, and that was a huge learning curve, not only with the different type of track, totally different style of track, but just learning the limits of the car with aero was just a complete game changer, totally different car, it felt like. And then from there, we went to Oregon Raceway Park. That was a great time. We all camped out the night before, raced all day the next day, some of us, DJ. And then camped again the night of, and it was super cool. That was definitely a good time. The Miata definitely felt on point. And from there, we went back to Ridge, which was super exciting because it's my first day back at Ridge with full aero. So I've got a pretty good benchmark on what the car could do without aero. So I got to compare not only aero to no aero, but all of the road course driving and autocross driving and just a more serious mentality going into events. It definitely didn't go as planned. It involves calipers coming loose maybe, and front wheel bearings also not being super happy, but there you could definitely see the lots of growth, not only in my driving style, but just my learning experience on the track as well, trying to use my time on track to not just go out there and be fast, but to learn different lines, learn the course better, and just take it all more seriously.
Which of the events that you attended this summer was your favorite?
Favorite, I'd have to say, was Oregon Raceway Park. I don't know why, I just feel like Ridge is kind of scary in a few spots, and it's like if you've been in, like, your shit is fucked, it feels like. Not that that's not the case at Oregon Raceway Park. It just seems like there's maybe a bit more runoff at Oregon Raceway Park. It just felt like more of a momentum track, which obviously caters towards the Miata more. It's a completely different vibe when you're all out there with the boys and you know that, like, no matter what happens, you still are, like, hanging out with everyone and having a good time.
What are you looking forward to outside of what you've done already for next season, be it same tracks, different organizations, or different tracks?
I think for the most part, I'm still probably going to just stick with on-grid, but I do have another Miata, a 99 NB, so I'm trying to do some drift days with that, and I'm also trying to do maybe a track day or two with that while co-driving with some other buddies.
What all have you done to the car in terms of modifications since you've owned it? I'm going to start off with, what have you done as far as powertrain, drivetrain, stuff like that?
Powertrain, drivetrain. So when I got the car, it was an open diff, and I autocrossed with the open diff for quite a while. One day I'm driving it home from work and the whole fucking diff just explodes. Like the next weekend, I went and picked up a VLSD. Still not super optimal, but it just bolted in right away. As far as the rest of the drivetrain, it's just a stock transmission. Man, I don't even know what clutch is in it, to be honest. I haven't separated the motor and the trans yet. It's stock motor. It's got an intake and exhaust, but it's still running like stock ECU, so it's not like it's making any more power. It's a 1.6, probably makes maybe 90, 95 horsepower on a good day.
Interior and safety equipment stuff. What all do you have done in that front?
I'd say interior is definitely somewhere where I spent more time than I think a lot of other track-focused drivers have. As far as interior goes, we've got a bare bones NRG racing seat, which, you know, is kind of cringe, but also like Sparco Sprint or a Recaro, whatever, doesn't make you any faster. So I've got a 5-point harness, a roll bar and harness bar, and I've got interior from a 93 LE Miata. I was lucky enough to get my hands on some, so I cobbled some of that and picked and choose what I wanted to put in the car. And aside from that, I've got a lot of little 3D printed bits that I've made.
Next question.
Yeah.
We were talking about all the stuff you did to your car, interior, blah blah blah, 93 LE, so rare, big jerk off Miata thing. What the fuck did you do to your suspension, bud?
Let's see, suspensions, like, I don't know, again, probably one of the pieces that I like more or less focused on more. So we've got coilovers from Shikara Motorsports. They're Panda CP1s. They helped me out with those, and I got those recommended to me from a buddy, Andy. Met him at Autocross, and he's kind of like guided me towards things, guided me away from things, and those coilovers were definitely one of them, and I've loved them, so shout out Andy for that. Aside from that, one of the first mods I did was a larger front sway bar, so that's definitely helped out a lot. Done little things, end links, steering rack spacers, tie rod ends, things like that. Extended lower ball joints, just little things like that to help with alignment specs.
Those E30 hubs are pretty cool. Does that count as suspension?
I guess it counts as suspension. So yeah, so the front wheel bearings is like a hub bearing combo. It's an E30 conversion. I chewed through a few upgraded hubs and finally got sick of that. So the E30 hub it's the same bolt pattern. It's just a larger bearing surface and a larger hub surface. So in theory, it should help dissipate any sort of forces or heat better than the Miata stuff.
Go through what all you did to the aero package once again.
Yeah, so aero package is all R-Theory stuff. So R-Theory packages utilizing some other stuff from other companies, but it's all bought through R-Theory. So the splitter, even the mirrors and the wing are from R-Theory. It's an APR airfoil and R-Theory uprights and end plates, and then it's my own custom design, cut, welded, painted upright adapters so that you don't have to cut a giant chunk out of your trunk. Not that I would care about cutting into my carbon trunk given what I do for work. I do composite prosthetics, so I definitely have no problem cutting into carbon. It's just a looks thing for me is what drove that decision. The splitter, again, is an R-Theory splitter. I definitely fucked it up on my first track day pretty good. I went off track and the mounting holes kind of cracked open and it was definitely not flat anymore, and it kind of, I didn't realize how fucked up it was until I was driving home at 70 miles an hour and I could hear it dragging on the ground. So I flattened it back as much as I possibly could, threw some carbon over the mounting holes to reinforce it, and then just to make it all look cohesive, I threw carbon over the top and the bottom as well.
What was the thing that made the most difference in how the car behaves either on track or just driving in general?
I'd say when I was doing autocross, I did a switch from running 205 RE71Rs and I switched to a 225 Nanking CR1. It's now called a CRS. And that was a huge step up just in terms of grip and capability of the car. So I'd say that is one of the two. And then the other one is definitely adding aero. So I had done one track day with just the splitter, my second track day with no aero because I fucked up the splitter, and then my third track day with full aero. So full aero, definitely a huge game changer. It's definitely a giant learning curve. You know, I thought I knew the limits of the car pretty well before I added aero, and then you add aero and the limit of the car just absolutely takes off from there. So that's definitely a huge change in the car for me.
Is there an end goal for this car?
That's a tough question. I don't think any of us really have like end goals. I think we all have like end visions from where we're at right now. But I think as we go on, that vision kind of changes and there's always more and more we're adding to it. So, you know, eventually I'd like to add power. Eventually I'd like to maybe run a wider tire setup, maybe, you know, do some other cool aesthetic things like a carbon hood, things like that. But I think ultimately for me, what the end goal of this car is to have a car that challenges me, but is still reliable. I can still, take it to every single event I want to do. And honestly, I want a car that I have to work on as little as possible, because I think as much as we love working on cars, I think it's a totally different game when you have to stress to get a car done for an event. And if I can avoid that, then I think that's what I'd ultimately want for the car.
What do you think that the biggest weakness of your car is, be it on or off track?
It's easy to say the biggest weakness is obviously the lack of power. For me, that doesn't bother me so much right now as far as my own driving experience. It's only when I kind of compare myself to other cars, such as S2000s, that I'm like, yeah, power would be really cool. But I think for my own journey, for what the car really needs right now, I think its biggest weakness is the brake setup. Currently, it's running the 1.6 brake setup, which is the smallest brake rotor and pad size ever offered in a Miata. It's definitely not great. I don't experience any sort of brake fade at any of the tracks I've been to. You can just tell it doesn't have the clamping force that other Miata brake packages offer.
Were you going for a certain style when you put the car together, or did things just kind of work out the way they worked out?
Yeah, I'd say, I don't know. I definitely had I've had this blend, like as I've mentioned, of function and of looks. So there's definitely a lot of that, I don't think I've ever looked at another Miata and said, that's what I want, or I'm going to try to copy that. So as kind of cheesy as it sounds, I think that my style with the car is, fully originally mine. I don't see a lot of stock body cars with big wing and big splitter up front. Usually you see, cut fenders, over fenders, fully stripped interior at that point. So I'd say my style with this Miata, I'd say, is kind of its own deal. And it just kind of happened. I don't think I really planned it all out or anything like that. Sure, wheels I definitely had planned out, but it was never, let's just do A, B, and C and then we'll be good.
Do you think that you installed the aero at the right time in your motorsports journey, or do you think that you should have waited?
That is a good question. I'd say if I was in any other car, it would be much too soon. But I really do believe the lack of power lends for a good excuse to get as much grip out of the car as I possibly can. I definitely know you're out there with not the same power figures, but very similar power figures with no aero and I think even a more narrow tire. And you're still a little faster than I am, just barely, at the ridge. Maybe a little slower some other days at other tracks. But, I don't think it's a bad choice. Would I do it at this time again? Maybe I'd wait a little longer, but I don't think it's like a Band-Aid or anything for my driving ability. I think my driving ability has allowed me to really open up the use of aero, and it's not just a Band-Aid for me.
What track out of the three that you've driven this year do you think that your aero package makes the most difference at? Because you had at PIR, did you have the whole deal set up?
Yeah, so Ridge is the only track that I've driven without aero. Every other track I've had full aero. There's definitely some corners at PIR that I'm able to take quite a bit faster than some other guys. Same thing with ORP. There's definitely corners that, again, I'm able to just take faster than other guys just because I have more grip.
Yeah, turn 14 ORP up the hill, last one before the the start finish.
Yeah.
That was definitely something that both me and Chris will probably attest to this. You were like, you could probably full throttle through it. And
I was.
we were having to let off because it was walking our car off to the passenger side and we were getting close to the rumble strip on the outside.
Yeah, and that's definitely a sketchy part. And that was honestly like, that took me all day to reach that point to where I could stay full throttle through there. And yeah, it's definitely a sketchy spot. It's a blind corner. You're coming up a crest, and if you fuck up and let off throttle at the wrong time, top of the crest, you're definitely going into the barrier that's right there. But I stayed in it, and I wish I think it's a GR86 you can see me pulling up on wasn't in my way. I would have had just a little bit faster of a lap time if he wasn't there.
Is driving a stock engine 1.6 Miata on track with cars that make a lot more power than you as intimidating as it seems?
Man, I wouldn't say it's intimidating. I'd say at times it's painful. Just because, you're with some of these guys throughout the whole course, and courses like Ridge have just long straights throughout the front, and then you just get gapped by guys on the straight. And that part definitely sucks, If I had, 30, 40, 50 horsepower or more, I'd be more competitive with a lot of those guys. So I wouldn't necessarily say it's intimidating. I'd say I like being the underdog, and I feel like the Miata definitely lends itself to that as well. So I think it's definitely enjoyable to be closer to fast guys' times than faster than slow guys' times, if that makes any sense.
Yes, that makes sense.
That's more enjoyable for me. So I wouldn't necessarily say I'm intimidated by faster cars. It's just something you got to get used to as a driver, just being more aware.
What was the biggest thing the 2022 summer track season has taught you? Doesn't have to be car related, anything.
Anything can happen. I think that's the biggest takeaway. You look at guys like Apex Attack, right?
Yeah.
His MR2.
Mike Reed.
Yep. Super unfortunate, but he had a fire incident down at PIR when I was down there. And, I'd say he's built his car to like a caliber that a lot of us strive for. And to see something like that happen to a guy who's worked so hard and has built his car to such a high level is definitely scary. And, you definitely see guys who are confident in their driving go off and either have a crash or things break or stuff like that. I don't think any one of us are invincible. I think we're all susceptible to making dumb decisions, dumb mistakes, whether that be in life and on track. You just gotta prep for the worst, but do your best.
Stemming off of that previous question, how does it feel to be one of the few that made it through the 2022 track season without any major incidents or unexpected disassemblies?
Yeah, so, the only incident I had was the caliper bolt coming undone on my rear caliper, which definitely totally my fault. I don't know, I'm not a Loctite guy. I've just always torqued to spec, but I guess I'm a Loctite guy now. So I'd say it feels pretty good. Honestly, I'd love to sit here and say that's just because, I built my car better than everyone else. But honestly, I've probably touched my car the least out of a lot of other guys here. And I'm not sure if that attributes to less possible mistakes or if that's, I did it right the first time or what. But it definitely feels good that my car made it through. And that's a huge part of the whole philosophy of this car for me is try to work on it as little as possible and just keep bashing it.
My question to you is there's been some rumors going around that you installed the aero package just because Chris beat you at Autocross. What do you have to say about that?
One, I've never heard this rumor. That's hilarious. Two, Chris is a really good driver. No, it's obviously not true. I didn't add aero because I wanted to beat Chris at Autocross. Part of it for me, again, was just like a looks thing as well as a function thing. And a big wing like I have now and a splitter was always in my final vision. And whether it was coincidentally after Chris beat me or after DJ beat me or what, Doesn't really matter. It was always going to happen one way or another, sometime or another.
Okay, this is the last question. Super open-ended. I guess, what's next for you as a driver or for the car?
What's next for me as a driver? So for me as a driver next year, I'd really like to focus on refining the car just a little bit, but mostly just refining my skills and just becoming more comfortable with the car and figuring out what that real limit of the car is in its current form. Eventually, I'd like to swap out some exhaust components, do some seats and a hood and a few other little aesthetic details here and there. The only other thing for me as a driver that I'd really like to experience is more time looking at other drivers' philosophies. So I really enjoyed my time with you, Aaron, driving with you in your Civic. Not only because it was something that I wanted to do, but it was a completely different ball game, and you have to have a totally different mentality going into it, and trying to learn from you, from what you already know so much about, and trying to adapt quickly and then put in my own input, I think is a really good mental challenge. And that's what really drove me to want to drive your car, is to not only experience that kind of driving, just to experience that kind of mental challenge. And with that, I'd like to have myself and others drive the other Miata I have, so that we can grow mentally as drivers and bounce ideas and theories and things off of each other.